negotiations to get to this stage must have been incredibly delicate and perilous. So what can you tell us about what will have gone into reaching this point?
Well, first of all, Vanessa, thank you very much for inviting me on. And the first thing that I think I would like to say is, yes, of course, it's a stage in this huge sort of globally impacted conflict that human lives have been respected and people have been released. My immediate thought is with those who still have loved ones who have not been released. And I was watching your guest Will Geddes there and agree with what he says. It's a very delicate situation. What leads up to these things, particularly when governments become involved, is, as you say, probably no surprise to anybody, incredibly complex. There are many, many moving parts. And I think one of the important things to remember is that whilst everybody's working towards, hopefully, a common aim, there will always be agendas going on in the margins for governments, particularly for human beings. What are the impacts? What are the reputational impacts? How do we trust people that maybe we have not openly trusted before? And I think that's a key point here in any kind of hostage situation. It could be something much, much smaller and domestic, or it could be on the international stage, that in order to reach a situation where releases of hostages or prisoners or detainees happens, there has to be a degree of trust. And obviously with a situation of this magnitude and this size, that isn't easy to achieve, particularly when we look at the history of the Middle Eastern conflicts. So it's a very dangerous time. We have a saying that the most dangerous time is when we think we're winning. It's an incredibly dangerous time. So on the one hand, I would say that a degree of trust clearly has been. I noticed reached. I noticed that you said a bit earlier on about giving away information where people have been held. Have they been held underground? And of course, that will be a concern for Hamas and the Israeli side. Of course it will. So the fact that this release has been successful, albeit it's one small part of the conflict, gives me cause for optimism that trust is possible between the parties.
And does it give you cause for optimism for the remaining hostages and their families? Does it give you cause to hope that if this very first initial incredibly fragile and delicate maneuver has been accomplished, and it sounds as if it has, that means the next 24 hostages, now the pathway has kind of been established and the structure of how it's all going to work can be released on time, and that will continue to happen?
Well, does it give me cause for optimism? I think on the one hand, and forgive me for perhaps boxing and coxing here, Vanessa, but on the one hand, yes, it does. Because now we have a precedent of a set of circumstances where releases of hostages and detainees can happen. So the first time it happens is monumental, obviously, because as I just said, there is a theatre in which this can happen, hopefully safely for all concerned. So there is a model and a precedent where it can happen again. Whether the will is there for it to happen again, nobody really knows. Any group, any individual holding hostages, they hold them for a reason. That reason may be for financial gain. That reason may be for ideological issues. That reason may be logistical issues. So number one, let's hope and pray that remaining hostages are still alive and well. That's the first thing. If they are, then let's hope and pray that dialogue can take place, because without that, it won't happen. Dialogue can take place to enable this precedent to be followed. My word of caution on that optimism would be that hostages are held on many occasions for leverage.
Yes.
And common sense says that if you are looking for a solution in this kind of situation, you are reluctant to relinquish all that leverage that you have gained. That's in many respects why I urge caution in this aspect, because there are many people with loved ones who are still being held, and nobody can guarantee that those people will be released. And it would be irresponsible to raise false hope in that respect. But let's hope this precedent can be followed and dialogue can continue, and this little shaft of light can be shone elsewhere.
One of the things that has, I suppose, upset Israelis, who are already very upset indeed, is the idea that Hamas has called the shots in terms of decreeing which of the hostages will be released and which won't be released. And they've given no information. So families haven't known. They haven't had a phone call saying, yes, it's your mother, it's your baby, nothing of the kind. And it's up to Hamas. And then Will Geddes said, and he says it from experience, as I know you know, that you know, some of the hostages may no longer be with us, and some of them may be very ill or very seriously wounded, and they might be the hostages that they wait and wait and wait to unveil the fate of. Do you think that might be the case?
Well, I certainly wouldn't say it's not the case, Vanessa. And I think one of the things, having worked with families and supported families in incidents, perhaps not of this magnitude of a global level, but certainly it doesn't matter. The impact on the family when somebody's being held against their will is pretty much the same. And I've worked with a lot of those families. And one of the key things is never, ever to lie, because it's not fair. It's disingenuous, and it's incumbent upon us to be honest and truthful, which is why my heart goes out to the people with loved ones that have not been released. So yes, this is a very, very dangerous situation. Is it possible and feasible that some of those hostages may have passed away? Yes, it is possible. We hope it isn't. We hope that's not the case. And in fact, in my experience, even those people who feel that hostage taking is a legitimate exercise, generally, and I stress the word generally, maintain the health of a hostage. Yes, it's traumatic. Of course, it's traumatic. But if there is leverage to be gained, it won't be gained by deliberately harming or even killing a hostage. So I retain a degree of hope, but I agree with Will that the sadder scenario is a possibility.
One of the things we've heard is that although a 4-day amnesty or cessation in hostilities has been agreed, there is a possibility that Hamas might negotiate that for a further day in which no shots are fired and no rockets are fired and there's no hostilities, they will release more hostages. So for each day of no fighting, some more hostages might be released in addition to the 4 days already agreed. Does that sound like something to you that could happen in probability?
I honestly, I would hesitate to comment on that kind of speculation. I mean, if that happened, and there was a window for more people to be returned to their families and loved ones, then, you know, as a negotiator, as a crisis manager, I would pursue that opportunity. But of course, you mentioned Hamas calling the shots, but of course Hamas hold the hostages.
Yes, quite.
I would suggest that there would have to be things about which we don't know. There would have to be things happening in the background for Hamas to agree to release all hostages, unless there was, in their view, and this is where I'm straying into areas where I'm far from an expert,
Yes.
in their view, that there were greater gains to be made elsewhere.
Chris,